What's up, everybody? We've got a couple things to go over today. First off, we had the Fed meeting yesterday, as many of you know. We're seeing a little bit of red among the Bitcoin miners, among Bitcoin, crypto in general. One thing to consider was this rate cut was like a 98% probability. The market fully expected it. Buy the rumor, sell the news. I don't think that means the party's over, and neither does Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor, funny enough, sees $150,000 Bitcoin. That sounds so familiar. I wonder why. Michael Saylor predicts Bitcoin will reach $150,000 by the end of the year. As do I. And I don't know how long he's had this price target. I don't know if this is new, because I don't remember him saying that before. So he's copying me. That's how it is. That's for sure the case. Jokes aside, Michael Saylor also sees 150K by the end of the year. And despite holding $71 billion worth of Bitcoin, he plans to keep buying the top forever. As cycles progress, previous highs of previous cycles get broken, in some cases to never be seen again. So it's a little tongue-in-cheek, buying the top forever. While no one likes to buy the tops and be sitting at a loss for a good portion of crypto winter, the reality is with Bitcoin, if you have a long-term approach, you can't lose. And Michael Saylor knows this. He also predicts that Bitcoin will reach $1 million within 4 to 8 years. I'd lean towards the 8 years. I think 4 years is way too soon, personally. 8 years or more even, in reality. And a $20 million Bitcoin over the next 2 decades. Next up, I want to talk about the Fed meeting, and then we'll look at the probabilities of future cuts. Powell says another rate cut in December is not a foregone conclusion, meaning that there's a chance of it despite the government shutdown, despite going in blind basically. We have hardly any economic data, hardly any inflation data. We got CPI, and it was slightly elevated. It is right around 3%, far from the Fed's 2% target, while the labor market is weakening. The Fed is definitely in a tough spot. Be that as it may, the Fed did cut 25 basis points, and we did have a dissent. We had a Fed member that believed we needed a 50 basis point cut, and a Fed member that believed we didn't need a rate cut yet. Newly appointed Governor Stephen Moran wanted to go further in cutting rates, while Kansas City Fed Pres Jeffrey while Kansas City Fed President dissented in support of no cut. And there was a growing chorus to at least wait a cycle before making another cut. The Fed lately has been focused more on the job market, and the central bank is watching layoffs very, very carefully. You see a significant number of companies either announcing that they are not going to be doing much hiring or actually doing layoffs, and much of the time they're talking about AI and what it can do. We're watching that very carefully. Amazon announced they would cut 14,000 jobs. Paramount laying off at least 1,000. UPS terminating 48,000 employees this year, likely after we get through Christmas, after all the packages get delivered. This is definitely a busy period for Amazon, UPS, etc. So I would guess this is like the very, very tail end of the year, but that'd be my guess. Target eliminating 1,800 corporate jobs. Its first major layoffs in a decade. And while the expectation for a rate cut was basically completely baked in, for the Fed meeting we just got through, the market completely expected a rate cut. Things are different coming into the end of the year. For the December meeting, we've got a 72% chance of a cut, 27% chance of no cut, more than likely a cut coming, but not like a 98% chance. There is some uncertainty here. Going into January 2026, it sees a 57% chance of a rate cut. And you can see as we progress through the year 2026, we get lower and lower rates. This is where we're currently at in terms of rates. And by June of 2026, it sees a 3% chance of being there, more likely being closer towards the 2% in terms of rates. So we are definitely in a cutting cycle for the Fed, which tends to be good for risk on assets. Plus, we've got words of QE coming, which brings more liquidity into the market. Now, I did touch on this the other day, but we're at a new low. Bitcoin balance on exchange, despite Bitcoin showing some weakness from its all-time high here in October, early October, Bitcoin supply continues to drop. We will continue to see Bitcoin being taken off of exchange. Imagine when Bitcoin's direction starts changing and we start getting a nice pop, a nice pump. Look how quickly the supply drops when Bitcoin is running in price. When there's excitement, when there's hype, when everyone's jumping over each other trying to buy more, that's when supply quickly drops. But to see it dropping here while Bitcoin's showing some weakness, while sentiment isn't the best, that tells a lot if you ask me. Bouncing over to the Bitcoin spot ETFs and the new Solana ETF, we saw a $500 million exit Bitcoin and ETH ETFs, while we saw 1.4 million inflow on the debut of the Solana ETF. And Bitwise's BSOL added 46 million. However, they launched a day earlier, $70 million inflow nearly on day one, $46 million inflow yesterday. Eric Balchunas cites the WEBULL volumes as a huge number. On the first day, it saw 57, nearly $58 million in trading volume, the most of any ETF launch on the first day this year. And it seems that this government shutdown kind of helped this come into fruition, at least in terms of these being approved. The SEC allowed ETF issuers to proceed without direct staff review, filing final S1s without delaying amendments, and utilizing newly approved generic listing standards. There were other altcoin ETFs such as the Litecoin and the HBAR one also seeing their first inflows, however very small. It's interesting to see that at least there's some inflows while Bitcoin is selling off, while Bitcoin's seeing outflows, while Bitcoin's seeing a little bit of fear. Some are still speculating that end of cycle alt season. I guess it would be impossible to see any outflows as they are brand new. How are you going to have an outflow when there's nothing in there? Of course, they're going to see inflows at first. Still exciting nonetheless, seeing these new alt ETFs getting at least some attention, getting a massive amount of volume. Now, I did want to look at Bitcoin, then we'll take a look at Solana. Bitcoin on the weekly has a bearish divergence. The RSI is coming down while the price is going up. I'd be very cautious. We've seen this last cycle. We saw the RSI fall off an absolute cliff and the Bitcoin price went higher, and that did mark the top. Crucial thing to watch that I've been yelling at you guys blue in the face. You need to watch this, the 50 MA on the weekly. We come down every time, retest it. We got, sorry, this is in the way, the W pattern. We basically got a retest every time, a retest multiple times in the cycle. This was back in 2024. This is in 2025. Here we are again. We came down and tested it, got a bounce, a $10,000 up move, just like we have seen back here. This massive move back up, but then a retest. We're coming back towards it. We are just a couple percent away. I have a feeling we're going to test it, give it that retest. It's a 4% down. We come back, we get a strong bounce here. After that, I think Bitcoin is going to new all-time highs unless we fail it. If we fail, fall under it, just like we saw all-time highs early this cycle, it's a possibility we see the cycle end early this cycle. Maybe Bitcoin doesn't pump throughout November, December. Maybe the cycle is somewhat broken and we can see new highs in 2026. I still find it unlikely. I'm still rooting for 150k Bitcoin by the year end, and I think a bounce at the 50 MA on the weekly. If we do retest it and get a good bounce, 150k is damn near a certainty. How much did we move after the retest? After we got our retest, you saw nearly a double on Bitcoin, a 93% move after we came down, after that fear, got a test on the 50 MA, that retest, and we ran up 93%, or about $50,000 worth, $50,000 per coin increase. How about on the retest here? That gave us a immediate 42% move, a $32,000 move. If we could do something similar, we need just a 46% move. I think if we get a good bounce on the 50 MA and we see history repeat here, see that end of year hype, that excitement, a Santa rally, if you will, and then me and Michael Saylor are on point and we're going to see 150,000. But what'll be crucial, what'll be important is watching that 50 MA. If we break it, come up, retest it and fail, just like last cycle, that would be the big worry. So keep an eye on the 50 MA. If you don't care about seeing new all-time highs this cycle, be like Saylor and always buy the tops, knowing that over time, it will go back in the green. Think about the people that bought the top here. Some of them sold out of fear. Some of them eventually sold at a massive loss. Some of them held on. And rather than taking a massive loss, could be close to doubling up their money at this point, far outperforming the S&P 500. Do you think the cycle is ending early? Do you think we're going to see 150k by the year end? Do you think we're not going to see a crypto winter in 2026 if we continue to fall towards the end of the year? Will we see new all-time highs in 2026? Is the Bitcoin cycle broken? I still don't think so yet, but a break of the 50 MA might be a massive sign. Huge, important indicator to watch. Just like last cycle, once we break it, party's done. If we break it this time, I would think the party's done. But of course, nothing's certain. No indicator is 100%. And that's the thing with the stock market, with Bitcoin. You know, you can look at the past. The dumbest people are the ones that think they're 100% going to be right. You have to know that you're not always going to be right. Even if you do this for nearly a decade like I have, we're still basically blind. We have no idea what will happen. We can look at the cycle and go based off of that. We can use certain indicators, get an idea of what to expect, but still nothing is 100% certain. And there's really different levels to it. You might start out on this and think that people in the WEBULL comment section, people on StockTwits are onto something when they have some kind of price target in mind. The reality is no one knows. No one knows. That said, we can see sentiment shift like this, and getting a 40-something% move from Bitcoin isn't out of the question, isn't impossible. We have seen that after we got that test on the 50 MA on the weekly, like I showed you guys, that swift recovery afterward, swift run to new all-time highs afterward, and I think that is what we're going to see. Now, looking at Solana, we have an important trend line to watch. If we break this trend line, we're likely to come down lower. Keep an eye out for a bounce on this trend line. If we can get a bounce, I do think we're going to come for all-time highs. Solana barely broke its all-time high from last cycle. The alts definitely haven't been all that exciting. However, you know, there are so many people saying, oh, this was previously this price, it's down here. Just to go back to our previous highs, it has to move that much. The market doesn't have to bring all the alts to new all-time highs. For example, Cardano hasn't hit an all-time high yet, and it's very unlikely that it will. The altcoin market is oversaturated. Money can only spread so much. It is spread too thin. There's too many alts out there. Versus last cycle, this cycle we have a plethora of altcoins with a little bit of money in each one. I do think to end the year we'll see some alts outperform Bitcoin, break their previous all-time highs, and some we won't see that. That's why risk management is key, diversification is key. Don't ever go all in on one thing. Instead, you want a few of the projects that you like. Some will do good, some not so good. Of course, I got burnt with Litecoin. I've got burnt with many projects. The VGX, for those of you that remember back in the day with Voyager, that went bankrupt. Things happen. The most important thing you can do in the market is manage your risk. Never go all in on one thing. If I had all my money on VGX thinking that, oh, I'm gonna make some easy 10x, and then it went bankrupt, all your work you've done over the years would have been wiped out. So always manage risk. Risk management is number one. Thanks as always for watching. I know this end of this video kind of took like a negative turn, but there's nothing negative about managing risk. There's nothing negative about being cautious in the market. While I do think there's a higher probability that Bitcoin sees a new all-time high than not, I am aware that I can be wrong at times. But there are indicators that can guide us, such as that 50 MA like I mentioned. I think that is crucial to watch, and I'm going to be watching it very closely and keeping you guys updated along the way. How are you guys feeling? Do you think we get a Halloween rally? Do you think that we get a Santa rally to end the year? Don't forget, we get phases of fear. This was a Mt. Gox sell-off. We went from 74,000 on all that spot ETF hype, which initially saw a sell-off, and people thought, oh no, Wall Street's in, they're gonna manipulate it, it's game over. And then Bitcoin broke new all-time highs. But we saw this Mt. Gox sell-off from 74,000 down to 50,000. Those that bought the lows, those that bought the fear, it was well worth it. And I do think accumulating here isn't a horrible idea. Bitcoin in the end is a scarce asset. You want as much as you can. Of course, the lower price, the better, the more you can accumulate. But during times of worry, times of doubt, usually those are the times to add. Of course, things can get worse than here. I mean, in terms of the RSI, we're sitting right at the 50. A quick look at the 4 hour shows that we're oversold. We might be due for a bounce soon. Of course, you'd rather see it oversold on the daily or the weekly if you really want to get a deep discount. Although buying when oversold on even something as small time frame as the 4 hour can tend to be a good idea. But anyways, I'm starting to ramble on and getting sidetracked and don't know how to end this video. So let me know what you guys think. Is Bitcoin seeing 150,000 this year? Or are we going to break that 50 MA on the weekly? What indicators are you looking at? Let me remind you of this, and I'll link it down below for you guys. Here we are. Bull market peak indicators. Sell at the top. 0 out of 30 of these have hit. It is 100% hold. Of course, one thing to consider is if Bitcoin isn't as volatile, if Bitcoin doesn't move as much as last cycles, you're unlikely to see a lot of these hit. That's one thing to consider. That's the negative. But the positive is not a single top indicator has hit yet. I think that is a great sign. And of course, following the cycle, you know, it's not over till it's over. It's not over until we're in November to December. That is when every cycle has typically ended, not as early as October. I do think this is the final storm before the sunny days, the final pullback before that euphoric rally, before those new all-time highs that we should continue to sell into and continue to trim into that strength. When we see some great green days, make sure you're trimming, in my opinion at least, the proxies. Hold Bitcoin forever like Michael Saylor, that's great. But yeah, I'll link this down below for you guys. It is worth watching at least. But one thing to consider, like I said, you know, if Bitcoin's not as volatile, it's unlikely that it's going to hit all these indicators and give you a clear, you know, time to sell. But I would expect at least some of these indicators to hit, of which 0 did. Bitcoin, according to this, is 100% hold. So hold I will. But thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you tomorrow.